Disabled American Veterans Winter Sports Clinic is being held this week up at Snowmass. Today and this week they've been down here in Glenwood Springs at the Elks and in the pool. The event tonight is being sponsored by the Western Slope Veterans Coalition, headquarters here in the Glenwood Springs area. They have done a great job in reaching out to the community. 2 years ago, they just started. Now they have 8 cadets. They do community service. They've been serving the disabled veterans this week. We were here and met at the doors. So let's give a big hand for the cadets. About 4 years ago, I met our guest of honor tonight, Dave Riley, at the Winter Sports Clinic. And I've known him through John Pettit. John Pettit is very responsible for his friendship with Dave Riley and bringing this group here through the Western Slope Veterans Coalition. And David is the first quadruple amputee to become the national commander of the Disabled American Veterans. This week we have 375 participants here. I was with Dave on Saturday night, the sponsors banquet, the opening ceremonies, and we are very honored to have him here with us tonight. And his goal as national commander of 1.3 million disabled veterans is to continue lifetime support for veterans and their families. And I'd like to mention the importance of the families in the military, the wives that stand by, and his wife Yvonne. Where's Yvonne? Is she here? She's here tonight. Thank you, Yvonne. I've known Yvonne as long as I've known Dave. So Dave comes from a military family. His father was a 2-star Army general, and Dave was raised up in the military. Matter of fact, he enlisted in the Army and served for 6 years before joining the Coast Guard. I think that he wanted to do a little swimming, so he got out of the Army and joined the Coast Guard as a rescue swimmer. He served in Korea, and he was a helicopter rescue swimmer for the Coast Guard. And while on active duty at the Coast Guard Aviation Training Center in Mobile, Alabama, he contracted septic shock from a sepsis. He was hospitalized for 3 months and lost all 4 limbs and some internal organs due to infection. After that time, Dave went and got a computer science degree and also a master's, but I think he got a little restless and wanted to get out and do something, so he reached out and came to Winter Sports Clinic here 9 years ago. And Dave is a true inspiration to all of us. He's our hero, and he's the first quadruple amputee veteran to become the national commander of the DAV. Let's give Dave a big welcome. Dave.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for letting me come out here for my story tonight. We came into the airport, and the cadets were all there lined up. It was really an impressive sight, so I want to again thank the cadets for all their help tonight. As a young man, I knew I was destined for the military. My family has a very rich military legacy dating back to World War II. My dad was an Army general, and I couldn't wait to be in uniform. Now, initially, I was in the Army. I'd like to think I would have been a pretty good soldier. Unfortunately, well, they found out I could read real well, so they made me join the Coast Guard. I became a rescue swimmer. And up to that point, it was undoubtedly the hardest thing I'd ever done. Y'all remember the movie with Kevin Costner? That was me. Only I'd like to think I'm a little better looking. We started with a class of 26, and we graduated with 6. The motto of Coast Guard Rescue Swimmer is, "So others may live." To me, there are a few higher callings in this world than dedicating yourself to saving lives. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. Personally, I also believe there are few people finer or braver than the men and women who commit to wear the nation's uniform. Less than 0.5% of our country's total population currently stand alert overseas, in the air, and on our shores today, so the rest of us can enjoy the freedoms everyone in this room cherishes. But serve they do. They willingly raise their hand and say, "Send me, I will go," when America calls. But that service sometimes comes with a price. I guess I should have remained a workaholic like I'd been all my life, because it wasn't until finally I went on vacation and was swimming near Dauphin Island, Alabama, when I got sick. Early in my military service, I had an injury that ruptured my spleen. It left me vulnerable to a very rare form of bacteria in the ocean. As a result, I contracted septic shock, followed by gangrene. In a profession like mine, you tend to think that the dangers to your personal safety are big. Obvious things like being in a helo crash or getting on the wrong side of a great white shark. But instead, it was a microscopic bacterium that almost took my life. I became very ill and eventually was in a coma. The sickness was spreading throughout my body, and I was in and out of consciousness. I had to come to terms with the fact that I was going to die. I remember feeling sorry for my wife, who would have to raise our children alone. I remember thinking of all the things that I had left to do. Just like many of you here, I had goals, dreams, ambitions, both professionally and personally. While I was drifting in and out of consciousness, someone else was also going through their own trauma. You see, my wife Yvonne, who I love more than anything in this world, had to be brave enough to make my medical decisions for me. I can't imagine the stress she went through in telling the doctors that they could amputate my limbs so I could have a chance of surviving. I woke up to discover I had no arms and no legs. Some of you may have noticed that about me. I was devastated. I imagined spending the rest of my life in bed, having others feed me, to essentially do everything for me, and that's just not who I was. It was an anguish I don't wish on anyone. But then, some very special people came into my life. While in the hospital, I was visited by people from DAV, Disabled American Veterans. They went to work immediately to help me get my benefits. They ensured my family and I had the means to take care of ourselves. Then the local DAV chapter came by to visit and introduce themselves. These were fellow veterans, disabled veterans. I had found a second family. I got involved in the local DAV chapter, and through encouragement from fellow disabled veterans, I found I was strong enough to go to school and get my bachelor's degree and then a master's degree. I was strong enough to start my own business. I learned the only limitations I had were the ones I placed upon myself. This is true whether you're disabled or not. Since we're in a high school, I think it's appropriate to pass on a special message for students and parents joining us tonight. Students stand on the very threshold of greatness. I tend to view the world very simply. You can use what you've gained through your studies here and make the world and your own future a brighter place. Or you can rest on your laurels and think the world owes you something. But I learned through personal experience the world is as wonderful or as cruel as you choose it to be. I decided what I wanted and I went out there and grabbed it. Well, okay, I hooked him, but you got it. As we speak, the 31st National Disabled Veterans Winter Sports Clinic is happening in Snowmass, right here in your own backyard. Every year, your community hosts more than 375 veterans and hundreds of volunteers and coaches at an adaptive sports clinic that transforms the lives of the nation's most profoundly ill and injured veterans. Veterans arrive to the clinic feeling the active life they enjoyed is over and their life goals are limited. I know. Because several years ago, I was one of them. I don't mind telling you, I was in a very dark place at the time. But the clinic taught me something about being a disabled veteran. It taught me that the only limits we have are those we place on ourselves. After my first clinic, I made a pledge to myself that I would never let the loss of my arms and legs get in the way of me enjoying all that life has to offer. I was so grateful for my new lease on life. I wanted to pass on that joy to fellow disabled veterans. I've since learned that the deep sense of fulfillment and in the joy of giving back to others. It's a part of what makes my life complete. If you haven't felt the satisfaction of giving back to your local community, I encourage you to strongly consider it. Don't volunteer at the local food pantry at Christmas because you'll feel guilty if you don't. Don't send money to a charity once a year because you think you'll sleep better at night. Instead, I challenge you to find your personal higher calling and give the greatest gift anyone could possibly bestow on someone else, the gift of your time. I know this is a big ask because time is the one thing we give without knowing how much of it we have. As someone who has stared death in the face, I know how precious that gift is. But through giving, we receive joy, and the opportunities are limitless. Some of you may be able to volunteer in your veteran community and may be getting involved with DAV at the local level. You can learn more about volunteering through DAV at dav.org. For others, that may be choosing to serve in their community by being counted among America's bravest and joining the ranks of the armed forces. Regardless, I encourage everyone to commit yourself joyfully to whatever cause means something to you. And trust me, you will bring some light into your part of the world. Thank you for allowing me and my fellow veterans to visit your wonderful community this week, and for the privilege of speaking with you tonight. I wish you every success, every blessing, and hope you accomplish your goals. If you're so inclined, I'll ask you to take a moment to remember the men and women who have sacrificed for our way of life, and the men and women who are still in harm's way overseas. May God bless you, your families, our veterans, and our armed forces, and may He continue to bless this United States. Thank you very much.
Questions and answers from the audience, please. Please be seated and feel comfortable to ask any questions that you may have.
Who's first?
It's hard to see anybody out there with the lights. Sir, yes.
I found in combat that coming home was a spiritual journey, not just an emotional or physical journey. What can you, I'm not necessarily talking about religion, but the spiritual aspect of your journey. Can you comment on that in terms of how you had to?
Sure. When I was still flat on my back at BAMC, Brooke Army Medical Center, the days were bad, but the nights were really worse. My wife used to go to the Fisher house, and she'd be there overnight, so I was just left in the care of the nurses. Well, this one night, this rather rotund, very large, black nurse came up and sat next to me in bed, started reading scripture to me. You know, I was wrestling with not even wanting to stay here. I was not happy at all. But she said, put it on Jesus, and he'll take the load from you. So I did that. It gave me the confidence to continue on. Well, 2 years later, I go back to the Brooke Army Medical to thank this big black nurse. Okay, this is Brooke Army Medical Center. They're all Army nurses, Army doctors. There was never any big black nurse that worked there. So that's my story on spirit. Next.
Right here. Steve Child.
Okay.
When you were going to the activities up in Snowmass, what are your favorite things that you've done? I know there's a climbing wall and there's scuba diving and skiing and boarding and all sorts of things, but what are your favorite activities there?
Well, you know, I've since became disabled. I was a diver before, and so I've gone back to it. We just went off to Monterey and dove off of the 18th hole at Pebble Beach Sanctuary there. It's cold there. But what I enjoy the most here probably would be the ski bike. And it took me a while to get through all the different pieces of gear. You know, we started in the Mountain Man and then went to the Bionique and tried the mono, but I can't hold outriggers. So I have to just balance, and the mono was real hard to balance on. So, you know, with the ski bike, I can sit on it where I don't have to stand the whole time I'm skiing, and I have skis on my feet, and I can just power slide down the hill. So I was a big motorcycle racer, and I used to love that. So that's probably my favorite activity up there.
What was your favorite things of becoming part of the Army?
Part of the Army?
Yeah.
Well, you know, my father would say it got me out of the house. But, yeah, it's a funny story. You know, he was in the military, and it was never any doubt that that's where I was going. So he had it all set up for me to go to West Point, and you know, he went to, was gone for a year and a half. I assumed head of household. Well, then he came back and the war started. So I joined enlisted just to piss him off. But, I did about 6 years in the Army and, you know, transferred over to the Coast Guard during the early part of their creation of the rescue swimmer program. I was the first rescue swimmer in San Francisco, and it was still the best job I've ever had in my life. I mean, being able to drop into a boat and call in assets and just have the whole nation behind you on a rescue was something, and I really enjoyed it.
Are you the only son?
I have 2 brothers and a sister, all in the military.
Somebody back there?
Go ahead.
Have you ever said one of the bad guys to the Coast Guard, the wrong end of a great white shark? Has that ever happened to you?
Well, I tell the story sometimes. It wasn't a big shark, but we used to fly over and see, you know, 20-foot great whites a mile away from when we were dropping at night rescue operations and stuff. But this one, we were out training off at night off of Monterey, and you know, they lowered me down, usually 2 of us worked, and we did our rescue drills with 2. So I put the one swimmer in the basket, and he was going up into the lights, coming back going. So I got in the basket real quick, and they lifted us up, and a killer whale came right up underneath and looked at us, just like that. So there was lots of those type things.
Rather than a question, a comment. Both Dave and Dick mentioned about the Winter Sports Clinic with over 300 veterans. It takes a lot of volunteers to put that together. It's too late to volunteer this year, but you could step up next year and give a hand.
Absolutely, and you know, they start planning for this Winter Sports Clinic the day they leave here. It takes that long and that much to put it together. We have close to 1,000 volunteers helping over 375 veterans here. So it's important that we have volunteers, and if you have the inclination, we would love to have you out there. There's just a few things you have to do, but talk to Teresa Parks with the VA, and they'll help you get that done.
Man, you want to give them the website? They be,
Yeah, as wintersportsclinic.org.
Any other questions?
Hi, I have a son who is a junior in college who wants to pursue special ops in the Air Force. He's ROTC Air Force. And of course I've done lots of research into